Yeah, so I'm glad to be here again. So Frog is really kind of my fixed appointment each year. And this year I would like to talk to you a bit about, yeah, the not so nice side, maybe about esports. We have heard a lot now how much students, people can learn when doing esports. Um, I would like to talk about empathy and why empathy is so much needed when doing esports. So I think that's something we all know. Esports is not just something that relates to some people, so that just some people play or just some people watch. If you have a look at this graph, you can find quite a lot of them around. You can see that it's really having become a hype. So many people play esports, do esports, but even more people watch esports events. So you can see here there are quite a lot of you can say it's global cultural and economic phenomenon. And especially the age group 16 to 24-year-olds are attracted by esports and also by watching esports events. They are the most active fans. And esports is, on the one hand, entertainment, of course, it's sports, but it's also social spaces. It's kind of, especially if you think of the age group 16 to 24-year-old, it's important for identity formation, for community building, sometimes even for career aspiration, as we have just heard. And so these online events shape people, especially young people, how they behave towards each other, how they express emotions, how they form friendships, cultural belonging. We've just heard about this clash of culture, mixing cultural teams. And of course, there's something, so all the good things, but there's also something we have to bear in mind. So we have quite a lot of toxicity in esports. We have quite a lot of different forms of toxicity, not only regarding the players, but also the fans. So we have got racist or xenophobic insults. We have quite a lot of sexist comments, homophobic comments, direct hate speech, sometimes even explicit calls for violence, aggressive verbal attacks. We have got trolling, doxing, swatting, and all the terms that kind of have formed with that. And of course, we also have flaming, so repeated personal attacks. So all these also belongs to esports and the esports community culture around there. So it's especially when there is competition involved, especially when there are emotions involved. Yeah, so that's the maybe not so nice side. So this, just to give you some figures, this online toxicity, I would like to quote some figures of the Anti-Defamation League's 2022 report, which was called Hate is No Game. As you can see here, 83% of adult gamers and 60% of teenagers between 13 and 17 years reported being harassed in online games, which is quite a high figure. So just imagine that nearly everybody and more than half of the teenagers. So that's really something, yeah. Even more alarming, between 8 and 10% encountered extremist or white supremacist content during gameplay. And if we have kind of a look at research, literature, this kind of hate and discrimination is learned and reinforced, which means if I watch other people behaving in a negative way using hate speech, I might even learn that. I might even use that myself. So toxicity is not just a symptom, it's a social learning process. Because players internalize these kind of aggression, this kind of rewarding, ridicule, reproduce hate speech in chats, streams, and even in fan spaces. So why? Why does toxicity emerge in online gaming communities, in esports, in communities around that? We have to have a look at 3 levels. We have got the structural level, the social level, and the cultural level. If you have a look at the structural level, online play quite often combines being anonymous, it's intense competition, and there are always emotions involved when playing. Socially, we see group pressure. Even if you work in a team together to achieve something, there's group pressure. And sometimes even what psychologists call this reward for outrage. So it means being provocative or rude draws attention. It makes engagement, especially if you have these live chat environments. So it's even worse. And of course, if you have a look at the cultural side, gaming communities kind of normalize this hostile humor. It's kind of a label of banter, so it's kind of normalized. And this can create a culture where insults become kind of normal, even the social glue. So if you want to be part of a team, you have to behave like them. And empathy is quite often seen as a weakness. So this is kind of an empathy gap we're sometimes really facing. Of course, we can say that also a lot of measures are already done against toxic communities. Just to mention few, we have got AI-based moderation tools. We have got platforms that allow players to report or block offenders. We have tournaments, organizations who invest in peer-led community management, training workshops, respectful behavior. We have, of course, all these code of conducts and so on. So the problem is well known, I would say, and there's tried to do something. There also something like came across this game, a German health insurance presented this game at the Gamescom this summer in Germany. And yeah, basically gamers play together to fight the toxic monster Malice, which feeds on hate and hostility on the internet and can only be defeated through cooperation of several players. So it's a game you hardly can play on alone. You can try it, it's still online to play, but it's nearly impossible if you want to play it as a single person. So to defeat this monster, there are the superpowers: harmony, empathy, team spirit, and justice. So just to cleanse the monster of the toxic energy it has and transform it into a cute, peaceful creature. Of course, that's something to make aware of all this toxicity, and we know what we need, but how do we get more empathy? That's the big question, which not an easy answer, I can say. But before talking about what we need to create more empathy among esports players, online gamers, fans, and so on, let's have a look at what is this thing called empathy. So empathy is much more than just being nice to each other. Empathy is basically, if you have a very basic definition, it's the capacity to understand, to share, and to respond constructively to others' emotions, opinions, perspectives. So if you have a look at the literature, we have got different kinds of empathy. We have got cognitive empathy, which is understanding another person's perspective. We have affective empathy, feeling with them, emotionally resonating with their experience. And we have compassionate empathy, transforming that understanding into helpful pro-social action. So it's really complex when we talk about empathy because it's thinking, feeling, and acting. But it's really highly relevant, not only, of course, in online games, but in general. But today we're talking about, of course, esports and online games. So when we talk about this empathy gap in esports, we can say empathy is quite often missing when you have a look at hate speech dialogues or accusing each other. So we see, of course, verbal aggression, which kind of turns into entertainment. It's not seen as something negative. Dehumanization of opponents, even of teammates. Yeah, they become avatars, not the people that are behind. We have got gendered and racist abuse becomes normalized and sometimes even laughed at, so kind of a good joke. And players become, of course, emotionally desensitized. So they're used to it. They kind of don't even notice it even more. So this desensitization, this might but also lead to burnout. So withdrawal of some games, because if you're constantly kind of attacked, it's not fun anymore. So you quit playing. So lack of empathy, it of course harms the victims, but it kind of influences the whole social construct around. That's the reason why we talk about toxic communities around some games. So this is, of course, a moral and a cultural problem. And yeah, we need to do something about that. On the other hand, we can talk about games as empathy labs. So games can also help to create empathy, to train empathy. So we have quite a lot of research on games as empathy labs. So briefs, for example, demonstrated that perspective taking in virtual reality games reduces prejudice and bias. We have got Holbrook et al. He reviewed evidence that cooperative play fosters pro-social behavior and emotional well-being. We have got Costa and Tavares that showed that gamification can counter hate speech by promoting reflection and dialogue. We have got Turkey, for example, found that customizable avatars increase player identification, which also can be used to strengthen empathy towards others in the game. So on the one hand, we have got the toxic communities. On the other hand, we have also games as a solution. Games can help. But of course, games alone are not enough. So we basically need a really broad approach to that. And if you have a look at kind of a framework, which I thought about what is really necessary to strengthen empathy, to have more empathy in games, in online gaming, we have these 4 principles. So perspective taking through narrative, reflective facilitation, cooperative objectives and role diversity, and critical media literacy. Let's have a look at these 4 in a bit more detail. When we have perspective taking through narrative, there's also a lot of research on interactive storytelling. And this research shows that narrative engagement helps people to see the world through another person's eyes. So it's also called the Proteus effect, identifying with an avatar, a character. This changes how we see things and how we behave. Of course, if you have a look at esports, there's not that much narration always involved, but we can still use narrative techniques. So, for example, we can have a scenario-based training where players imagine how teammates in different roles experience pressure or frustration, so just taking on another role, or community storytelling, for example, sharing short videos or posts that highlight personal experience, cultural diversity, challenges within the scene. So just making it in very small durations possible to take or to walk in another person's shoes for a short time. The second part is reflective facilitation. What do you mean by that? It means creating structured opportunities to pause, to think, and to talk about behavior. Of course, when you're in an esports competition, it's maybe not a good idea to pause and just to think. Yeah, but you can do it before or after a competition. There are also studies that show reflection on in-game choices, on behavior. What I did can increase moral reasoning and can increase empathy. So this could be done quite in a simple way, just debriefing after a match, asking what went well, where did communication break down, why did it break down, what happened, just talking about it, reflecting it, or a moderated fan discussion after maybe there was a heated tournament, just to unpack emotions, talking about your emotions. Talking is quite easy, but it can do so much. So it's basically this kind of talk before you type, maybe not during the esports event, but at least afterwards. So then number 3 is cooperative objectives and role diversity. That's something we also heard in the first talk a bit, this cooperation, which is very, very important. So this working together, even if you're in a competition, teams can build in cooperative kind of mini goals. So tasks that reward collective achievements rather than just focusing on individual performance. There are also research shows that cooperative play reduces aggression and also kind of fosters pro-social behavior. So also role switching exercises where a team leader maybe takes on a support role for one match, not in the tournament maybe, but in training, just to help each other understand more the roles they take in. So it's kind of a shift from just a solo carry mindset to a shared success culture. That's something we really need. And finally, last but not least, critical media literacy. That's something we need basically every day nowadays. But critical media literacy, which is defined so as understanding not only what we say, but how digital platforms and cultures shape what feels acceptable to say. How can we train that? How can we train critical media literacy when it comes to hate speech, when it comes to online gaming, when it comes to esports? Yeah, for example, you could just have a closer look at anonymized chat transcripts. And again, talk about it, identify patterns of hate, patterns of exclusion, just to make people aware, discussing the impact specific words or maybe even actions or whichever might have. Especially if you have a look at online communities, memes can also be quite often used for transporting hate speech. Just having a look at that. Where does fun stop and hate speech begin? And of course, it also helps, community guidelines are everywhere, but quite often they're just there. But to identify more with guidelines, it helps to co-create them. Not just, okay, these are the guidelines you have to stick to, but just talk about it. Which guidelines do we need? What would we like to have in our environment? So this co-creation process is also very, very important. So basically from reaction again to reflection. And if we put all these principles together to have an empathic esports ecosystem, we need quite a lot of people. And so it's not something that just, okay, I've told you today, tomorrow everything will change. Unfortunately not. So this kind of ecosystem means we need to address players, we need to address fans, educators, developers, and platforms, because they all share responsibilities. They also need to know, they need to bear in mind, they need to change, like developers, they can design games, for example, that reward collaboration more or feature diverse narratives instead of focusing too much on competitions. Of course, educators, all kind of educators, if they're in school, at university, outside school, empathy exercises, just to learn. Also, to reflect needs to be learned. That's not something we know how to do just because we use games. Of course, fans have their share as well. Just to start with respectful dialogue, which is not an easy thing, of course, to put into practice. And of course, platforms also can support community-led moderation. These automated bans quite often are quite problematic because even if AI, as we also heard before, is becoming quite good, it still doesn't have the feeling we humans have for language. Yeah, so basically a lot of things to do, but I think if we want to have nice esport tournaments, if we want to have good, open online communities where everybody feels welcome, we need to do something and to tackle this, hate speech and toxicity. Yeah, so that's basically what I wanted to tell you about. So thank you. And if there are any questions, of course, I'm happy to answer them.